Connect streaming software to go live. Okay, it says live. We're about 5 minutes early. Let me get this up here just a little ways. Hi. We'll see what we get here. Okay, we've gone live. Okay, 30-second delay. I keep telling these people, delete and report junk. Well, okay, we've got 4 minutes to go time. Oh, we're getting closer here. I see Jim, Charles, Reggie, Joe, APK, Terrence from England, Reggie Love, Dr. Rye, wet, steamy Kennesaw, Georgia. It's a little bit humid here too for us. It's 71 outside with 42% humidity. In the room here, it's 73 with 35% humidity. We have had some, let's see, high, low. No rain for today. Okay, 33 mile an hour wind gust today. It doesn't say what time. That's interesting. Wind. Thursday daily wind 446, so just a little while ago. Yeah. All right, we're about ready to go. I think everything is in working order, which is good. I've somehow picked up a sudden interest in printing, as in Gutenberg, as in press, real type, everything like that. And I've just been watching lots of videos on it. There are lots of videos on that sort of thing. Very interesting. My wife, when she was in art school at the University of Nebraska, majored in printing. Intaglio, I think they call it, and etching and so on. Intaglio is the same process that's used for creating currency and so on. So very interesting. And there's a 1 hour British BBC TV show on Gutenberg. It was put out many years ago, but it's still current. I mean, nothing has changed since 2008 as far as printing, the original printing press. That was in 14 something. So that was interesting. It was interesting. Okay, I guess we'll start. Hello, electronics enthusiasts and ham radio operators the world around. I'm Dave Casler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, here with another weekly live stream on Thursday night here. It's at 6:45 p.m. Mountain Time. Whether that's daylight or standard depends on the time of the year, but it's always 7 o'clock or 6:45 local time. We're supposed to go for an hour and a half, but recently we've been going over a little bit. Sorry about that. I get to starting to talk, and you know how that goes. So I got something very interesting in the mail today. Well, this was actually came by UPS unannounced from the North Ottawa Amateur Radio Club. And it says, Dave enjoyed this key handcrafted in Grand Haven, Michigan by NOARC members, the North Ottawa. It's actually in the U.S. This is what the key looks like. You touch it by touching these things, and it actually makes them make contact with a little thingy on the board. We'll talk about that a little later. Let's see. We've got Tim Webb, Evening Day from Kentucky. Charles Layton, hello. Reggie Love, good morning, Mr. Casler. Joe Mercado, hello from Lebanon, Oregon. KG7JM, very best wishes. APK. I don't know what this there's this crown with the number 1 or number 2 in there, and I'm wondering if that means you're a member. And I don't know, let's click on it. That was top fans. Okay, top fans, okay. They keep changing things on YouTube, and I can't keep up. Let's see. Terrence from the UK to Echo Zero, India Papa Kilo. Good morning, Dave. Sorry, good evening, Dave. It's both. Where you are, it's the morning. It's 1:47, 1:45 in the morning there on British summertime. Hope I'm keeping well. I seem to be. Reggie Love, have you tried FreeDV? It's pretty cool digital voice over HF. I have not. I suppose I should do that. It says it pushes about 8 kilohertz audio over a 1500 hertz single sideband channel. And you ask how they can do that. There is a modulation method. In a modulation method, the actual symbol that is transmitted is the rate at which symbols are transmitted is called baud. The rate at which bits are transmitted is bits per second. There's no such thing as baud per second unless you're measuring acceleration, because that would mean symbols per second per second. But the thing is that a symbol can carry more than one bit. There are different ways of doing that with phase shifting and so on, or amplitude shifting. that kind of thing. And if you can lock onto a channel like that, you can get a lot more bits per second than baud. And so baud refers to symbols. A symbol can represent, 4 or 5 bits, whatever. Very often in ham radio, just 1 bit. But it's very interesting. Okay. I have not yet tried it, Reggie. I guess I should do that. Let me write down here, free DV. Free DV. And give it a try. I'm assuming that there are watering holes on HF where these free DV people gather. Doug Dry, hello, all Augies from Doug, KD4NC in wet, steamy Kennesaw, Georgia. We watch the news, which, of course, the national news originates from New York. And you've all seen that cartoon from the New Yorker years ago. It's a New Yorker's view of America, where on the very far west coast is named Hollywood, and California is a city in Hollywood. I sometimes think that people on the East Coast definitely have that view of anything that happens out here in the West. We've had some wildfires here, one in the Black Canyon National Park just north of us, and it basically burned everything on the southern side of the canyon, and it's kind of crept down into the canyon, but the canyon's well over 1,000 feet deep, and there's a river in the bottom, so unless the wind is just right, it's not going to cross the river. And I don't know what has happened to the visitor center. The visitor center is the only major structure on the south side, and it's a beautiful visitor center. It's got a very nice little walk right down to the edge with railings and everything, so you can lean over and not have to worry about falling in. That's not true at all of the stops that they have as you go along the canyon. There's beautiful views, but they have railings some places, but not everywhere. And I was once walking from a railing directly back to the car, and I came across this chasm and looked down. It was about 800 feet straight down, no railings or anything like that. If your kid were to go running across there, not paying attention, down he goes. Put your kids on a leash when you take them to the Grand Canyon or the Black Canyon of the Gunnison. All righty, here, let's see. We've got John Hummel Newell, Victor Echo 5, Japan Hotel Norway. Hello, Dave and the Augies. Hugo Quintana, I think that's a new name. Hello, Augies, enjoying 110 degrees in the shade in Yuma, Arizona, from W7UGO. You know, I saw something very interesting at Field Day. We have in our, quote, old trailer, we've got several trailers now, they had a device with a fan in it, a water reservoir in the bottom, and a pad in the back that the water would filter through, and it blew out nice cool air. And I thought, I got to find out more about those, because if you need spot cooling in a dry environment, that could work very well. And that's what they were doing in the 20-meter trailer. The 40-meter trailer was one of those little all-plastic short thingies. There's several companies that make them. And you go inside, and I kind of had claustrophobia in there, but it was so small. But that poor guy, he had his awning out, and then the wind caught it, tore off the awning, and blew it through one of the windows. Ouch. The club has offered to pay for it, but apparently he's, I don't know, going to use his insurance or whatever. But they would have to replace the awning and the window there. I used my RV for Field Day It was kind of a cooling station kind of thing. I turned off the generator that's in, there's a 3 kilowatt generator in the RV. I need to get this little device I can put in my air conditioner on the RV called Soft Start. The problem with the air conditioner in there, you need a 3 kilowatt generator to get it started, but a 2 kilowatt generator will run it. So the soft start thing starts it up more gently so that a 2 kilowatt generator can start that. I've got a 2 kilowatt generator in the garage that I used to use with our travel trailer. But the RVs, or the Class C RVs, have built-in generators. And it was quite noisy. And the nice thing about the 2 kilowatt, you get like 14 or 12 gauge extension cords, and you can put that generator way out in the middle of nowhere where nobody's bothered by the noise, and then still run the air conditioner and use it as a cooling place. We also had lots of water there. The club always has lots of water and lots of ice. And so you can get cold water anytime you need it, because it was 100 out there, I'm sure. Okay, let's see, where are we? Doug Dry, Monday was a happy birthday for Dave. Yes, I'm no longer 73, so no longer the perfect age for a ham operator. I'm now 74, so I don't know. One of these days I'm going to have to say that I'm getting old and admit to it. But yes, it was a very happy birthday. My thing I always want for my birthday is strawberry shortcake, which is a little hard to get here. You can get so-called fresh berries, but they have to be shipped in because I know strawberry season in Florida is February. Strawberry season in Southern California is March. And so in July, I don't know where they get the strawberries. I think what I might do next year, I like my strawberries all squished, because that way you get the juice. And Loretta likes them just cut up. So I think next year I might get some frozen strawberries and then thaw them and then put them in the blender to get that nice mix up of the berries. I don't know why, I've just liked strawberry shortcake ever since I was a kid. My mom made the little biscuit for the bottom out of Bisquick. You can also buy at the store these little sponge cake things that'll soak up all that juice, and you put whipped cream on top and just, it's hog heaven. Okay, so yeah, I'm 74 now. Joe Mercado in Lebanon, Oregon, where it's 87 degrees with 39% humidity. This is probably reasonably comfortable as long as the air is moving. John Hummel Newell, Victor Echo 5, it's 30 degrees centigrade here today, which is warm and smoky. I understand Canada is just having the fits with wildfires. For all I know, I don't know, maybe Trump sent some missiles into Canada to start those fires. There are fires everywhere. We've had fires here. There's fires across the border in Utah, and there's fires down in Arizona. Believe it or not, Arizona has some fairly large pine forests, and up at higher altitude. Lots of Arizona is at a higher altitude, from Kingman over to Flagstaff, over to Pine, and places like that. There's a whole kind of ridge around it. North of there is the Navajo Nation and the Hopi, and south of there is Phoenix, Tucson, things like that, which are at a much lower elevation, and can get very hot. Ooh, down there. I was in Tucson once when it was 120, and the problem was that they only allowed the airline to fill half the airline with passengers and luggage. The rest had to be empty in order for them to have some hope of getting off the ground. Fortunately, my United Airline number, whatever it was high enough that I got boarded and got out of there. It was interesting. Oh, boy, was that hot, but very low humidity. Okay, Ralph Leland, hi Dave and everyone, K4TA in Fork Union, Virginia. Chuck Schreiber, good evening Dave and all Augies, N5KVO from the hill country of South Texas. Sunny and 92. Now I imagine with all the rain you've had that it's still probably pretty humid. Mark French says hello. Larry says good morning world, hope all is well, nothing new here. No typhoons here and warm 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, that's good. Now, I know it's humid in Manila. It's always humid in Manila. We got a from Sega, $5 for the channel funds with a little guy that says keep it up there. So thank you very much for that immensely. That makes a difference. And I try to use that. You know, I almost never overspend what's available there. But I did buy a kit recently. This is the kit. It's the Bayou Jumper 40-meter CW transceiver, and in theory, it looks like the old spy sets the British made called the Parasets. It's laid out kind of similarly, although of course it's all modern stuff inside. And it's designed to fit in a box. And given the miniaturization, you don't need a full suitcase. This is the box. I picked it up today from Hobby Lobby. There's a specific SKU for it. And the kit fits right into this box here. So it looks like an ordinary box, and then has the, you open it up and it's an actual 40-meter QRP rig. And to be like the original Paraset, the radio is a regenerative receiver. It's not a super heterodyne, nor a direct conversion receiver. There is, I think, a closer relationship between a regenerative and a direct conversion. But one of the problems with the way a regenerative receiver works is you take a little bit of the output of the first amplifier in there and feed it back into the input. Positive feedback. And what positive feedback does is if you set the control right, they call it the throttle. If you set the control right, you won't go into oscillation, but it will greatly magnify the incoming signal. If you go any further than that, it will oscillate. And if a CW signal comes in, it acts as the beat frequency oscillator, and so you can hear the CW signal. If you go too far in the oscillation, it just squeals and it's of no use to anybody. So the idea is you get right there at the very edge of that oscillation. This was a very popular radio back during the teens, the 19-teens, and going into the 20s. A lot of ham radio novices in the 50s built regenerative receivers. There's a problem with them. If you want to hear CW, it's got to be just slightly into oscillation. And it oscillates at the same frequency as the incoming signal. And you move it so it's about 700 hertz off so you can hear the CW signal. Now, the problem with that is that it's oscillating. It's creating RF. And that can go via the tickler coil right down through the antenna coil and out. And if you listen on another receiver, you'll hear the squeal of the regenerative receiver. And back during World War I, this was not true in World War II, In World War I, the U-boats, the German U-boats, would listen for these squeals, for these things, very faint, and they do direction finding on it. And that's how they found the convoys. Because in order for the merchant ships to monitor a frequency for instructions, they had to have that regen slightly into oscillation, which meant they were broadcasting their presence. Needless to say, in World War II, all the radios were super heterodynes, and they had all kinds of features to make sure that none of those internal oscillators would find their way out the antenna. So nobody could track them from that. Now you take an ordinary television, in BBC they tax you for your radios and stuff like that. It's how they pay for BBC. But they can drive up and down the streets and just listen for the IF frequency. And they can tell who's got a radio and where, and if that address doesn't have a license for one, there'd be a little knock at the door. You owe so much. It used to be that you paid by the number of tubes. Well, when the first transistor radios came out, people said, no tubes, no fee. Needless to say, it did not take Parliament long to change that rule. Okay, Eric's, well, again, Sega, thank you. Ericsson M0XYN. Hi, Dave, from Smoky Hastings, Minnesota. Happy you're on. Good to be here. Now, I will not be here next week. Next week, there's a webinar at the same time as the live stream, and it's from the Experimental Aircraft Association, talking about a new FAA rulemaking provision called Mosaic. And Mosaic is an overhaul of the sport pilot and private pilot. For private pilot, one of the things that they're doing is saying that a doctor's certificate or something like that is good enough for your medical. For a sports pilot, just simply having a driver's license is good enough for your medical. And what they're doing is greatly expanding sport pilot privileges to include bigger aircraft like Cessna 172s and so on, heavier aircraft and so on. They said that the sport pilot was an experiment, and they said the accident rate has indicated that it's worked very well. It's just like the ultralight, which is governed by Section 107 in the Federal Air Regulations, is 2 pages long, and it completely covers all of the ultralights and has done so very successfully. And the sport pilot originally was built to what was called industry consensus standards. And they're expanding that a little bit to include some other aircraft. I mean, a light sport aircraft will handle like any other airplane, and fly like any other airplane, except it's much lighter. I know when I sold it, the guy who bought it had a private pilot's license and was used to flying heavier aircraft, and we did a stall, and he recovered by really pushing that yoke forward, which is how you recover from a stall. But you don't do it by going into a vertical dive. You do it by slightly bringing this thing down. It's just a little poke, and that brings you down. A little poke at the same time you add a little gas. So I said, wait, this thing's light, please. The aircraft weighed 840 pounds, I think. And you add 500 to that. And no, it was 740 pounds. You add 500 to that. You get to 1240, which is the max gross weight of the aircraft. At that time, I weighed a lot more than I do now. I've lost quite a bit of weight. Okay, let's see. Good evening from Las Vegas, from Joe Juan. or Joe B1 0240. Larry from Manila says, not certain how, but my right foot after our flood had an open wound. My daughter, who is an RN, is working with me. That's good. Not certain how, but my right foot had an open wound. Okay, I came through twice. Jeff M. says, hello, Dave, from KD9 ZSL. Carol Martin said, hello from the far west Missouri area. That's not Carol, that's N0QFT, I think Jeff. Glenn, not Jeff. I'm bad with names. Reggie Love said this newish autocoder uses machine learning, AI, and DSP. It sounds very good compared to every other mode I have heard used on ham radio, and I assume that is the the free DV, the same thing as that free DV. I'll have to try it. I assume you can download it, and you have to talk to it through your computer, which does the actual modulating and demodulating. So we'll see how that works. Okay, Raid V1. Joe Mercado, Swamp Cooler. Yeah, I know it's a swamp cooler, but I'd like to know what brand it is, because it's only about this big, sits about this high, maybe a foot and a half high. It has a reservoir at the bottom. I think it's probably over 2 gallons of water. So you just keep that filled, and that thing, put it right in front of you, and it will keep it cool. This wasn't, there was one year where we had to use a tent trailer for our 40-meter station. And so the guy who brought it rigged up a full-size swamp cooler and had the output of that ducted into the tent. Now, since it was full-size, it was using a lot of water. So he brought lots of water. And it actually succeeded in keeping the inside of that dark green canvas tent nice and cool. It was very nice. I've got to get my air conditioner converted so I can use my little 2 kilowatt generator and not have to listen to this stupid thing. Okay, Terrence to Echo Zero, India Papa Kilo, 14 centigrade in London, coming up to 2 a.m. That's a nice, comfortable night in my book. Very good. John Hummel Newell, VE5JHN, that sucks when you get damage. We always get rain on field day. We do too often. Last year, the wind was so bad. We have a little area. We've got, my RV is the primary windbreak. We've got another travel trailer as the northern windbreak. And then we put stuff on the other side, like the go-to station, which is in our new trailer. Put that on that side. So, and then we put up canopies over the top of it. And they're tied down pretty doggone good. But I'll tell you what, last year the wind was strong enough to blow all that down. Oh, the RV stayed upright, but it blew all the canopies down. So we didn't put them back up. The wind finally died away, and we had our annual field day dinner under the open sky. Okay, let's see. Well, Larry, I hope your foot heals quickly. When you have those typhoons, I know that it can flood there pretty easily. And Mormon missionaries work in pairs. And I always had an agreement with my companion. If it was over a foot deep water, we wouldn't tract there. We'd go somewhere else and tract. And I've seen water awful deep. I've taught lessons to investigators sitting in their living room while my feet were underwater. So, and you know what's in that water. That is not clean water. So Jeff M. Let's see, we've got that Reggie, Joe Swamp Cooler, 14C. Yeah, we always get rain on field day. I imagine a lot of people do. Used them in Barstow, California before everyone got grass and shrubbery and water. Yeah, that became a real problem down by Palm Springs, too. You get that area around it, and I can't remember the name of that valley. I think it's the Imperial Valley or something. Palm Springs is way at the north end before you go over the pass into the LA basin. And over the pass, there's always wind. And so there are a gazillion wind turbines up there, utility grade wind turbines that they put right there. That was one of the earlier wind farms. Now they put them out in Nebraska and Kansas on all the ridges out there. Most of the good wind territory is pretty much developed at this point. What people are doing, and I've seen a number do this, is they're planting their fields in solar panels. And they've discovered if they put them up 7 or 8 feet, okay, and they got this automatic tilting that follows the sun and everything, but up 7 or 8 feet, when they do have rain, the area on the ground is pretty much shaded. And so they can run animals on there. They can run sheep, they can run cattle, whatever they want to run. Although the cattle like to rub up on things, and they'll knock those solar panels over if they're not really strong. That's why they invented barbed wire, because a plain fence with steel wire, the cattle would just push them over. Now the barbed wire, they don't like to rub against barbed wire for some reason, so they stay where they're supposed to be. But they've found that they can grow vegetables under these. They can grow all kinds of things that, because it's pretty much shaded during the hot part of the day, they grow roses, strawberries, whatever you want to grow that's in the shade. It's hot out there, but it's not in the direct sun. You can't grow corn under there because corn wants heat and lots of it. It wants direct sunlight and it wants it to be hot. By the way, it's corn season here in the area. There's a place called Olathe up the street here, and there's a breed of corn called Olathe sweet corn, and to die for. And this time you go get it directly from the farmers markets, and they've got farmers markets. They bring it out, put it on ice, you take it home. You can cook them in the microwave, whatever you want to do, and oh, that is good sweet corn. Now, I can't eat sweet corn anymore with non-real teeth, so I bought a tool on Amazon. I'm going to try it out here, that you can use to get the corn off the cob and then eat it as cut corn. And I'm going to try that. I've been waiting all year to try this on some corn. So let's see. Swamp Pool, yeah, and Barstow's grown. It used to be that Barstow was basically one road. Not anymore. You know, years ago, and this was when I was in California, so this is the early 80s. We worked with the Air Force, and I knew a guy in the Air Force there. We became friends, and he lived out in Apple Valley. Apple Valley to the Air Force Station, well, it'd be a Space Force station at this point, because it dealt with missiles and stuff. SAMSO, the Space and Missile Systems Organization, was headquartered there, and that was where Aerospace Company was too. It was in El Segundo. And he did that commute every day. Every day. I said, why? He says, well, we can't afford anything in the LA basin. So he was out there in Apple Valley, and Apple Valley, and this was many years ago. It was after we moved to Colorado, but I think it was still before the year 2000. I would go down to California to visit my parents, and I had one younger sister there. And I took a road that I took as a teenager that was an empty road. It was the Victorville cutoff. It came into Highway 18 right at Lucerne Valley Dry Lake. And there was nothing on it except a gas station at the freeway exit. It took me the better part of an hour to get through there because the traffic was so bad. Shopping centers on both sides of the road, houses as far as the eye could see. All of that put in since I was a teenager. Man. But yeah, down in Palm Springs, people were putting in gardens and watering them. Apparently, Palm Springs sits above an enormous aquifer. And they have water rights to that. And they can essentially pump as much water as they would use in a city setting with all the grass lawns and everything like that, and not deplete the aquifer. Now, this is not like the Ogallala aquifer that was up in Nebraska and Wyoming and South Dakota. People pumped water out of that and eventually completely depleted the aquifer. And so all those farms and everything shut down. They actually, as they were pumping water, were getting a depletion allowance on their income tax, just like you would if you were pumping oil. Eventually the oil runs out, so you can write that off over a number of years and still make some money. And they pumped it out. There's no farms up there anymore. It's just prairie. Now you can run cattle on it, but it's cold in the winter. So you can't plant anything on it because there's no water for it. It's a desert, high desert. So anyway, the aquifer they've got in Palm Springs is large and quite sufficient for them. So yeah, I've been to Palm Springs. They have a really good air museum there. Okay, let's see. I'm not going to be on the radio today, but it's been suggested by several people that I continue that. I have noticed that on 40 meters, I'm not getting much action, and 40 meters is about the right band for this time of day. And I don't know, we'll try it. Now, again, this coming Thursday, I will be at a webinar on the new Mosaic program that the FAA has come out with for sport pilots. I mean, my license as it is, I can't land at night. I have to be on the ground from civic twilight to civic twilight. I can be in the air, but not after that. I didn't realize this until quite recently. There are 3 twilights. Civic twilight is when the sun is down to 6 degrees below the horizon. And the idea is that there's enough light still that you can walk around, do things, and whatever. Now then there's the, see if I get them in the right order here. There's the nautical. There's 3 twilights, and I get them mixed up. The nautical twilight is when the sun is 12 degrees below the horizon. There isn't enough light to read by, but there's still enough light in the upper atmosphere to make it difficult to use telescopes. Of course, Elon Musk has made it even harder to use telescopes with all of his satellites, but I use Starlink. That's what we're communicating over right now. The third is called nautical. I may have these backwards. Nautical twilight is 18 degrees below the horizon. And that's when it gets, and that may be the astronomical. The other, you can still get a little bit of light to see where the horizon is. So you can take your astronomical readings and star readings and stuff like that. But it's interesting because when we talk about gray line, and I'm going to be doing a video coming up real quick here on the gray line. I've had some questions on it, and we'll be talking about the three twilights and how the ionosphere makes the transition from day to night or night to day, and how there is a remarkable opportunity to talk to other stations that are also in the gray line, and that it's a worldwide type of phenomenon. You can get some stuff in there that's pretty good. Okay, let's see. Glenn is saying, I'm salivating over the mention of the strawberries. Yeah, they're good. Bill Myers, K-A-8-G-I-M. Hello, Dave and all Augies. Larry, one of our members here in the Philippines, is looking for frequencies to operate during the storms. PARA, the Philippine Amateur Radio Association, maintains 144.74 on 2 and 709.5, which of course in the U.S. is CW frequency. But I was going to tell him of some Gordon West mentioned. Okay, there you go. Now let's see here. 8291 kilohertz, we hear some mariners on there, mostly Asia, but when I listened to Sit Orb, there was no mention of the 8.8 earthquake alerts. If you're out in the middle of the ocean, you won't notice, as the water is deep, and that wave energy is funneled, like in a duct, through the whole depth. And if you're a mile deep there, the amount of water rise might be a quarter inch, something like that. It's when it gets to where the shore is that energy now has to spread in an increasingly thin layer of water, and it pushes the top of it many feet above normal. Now, apparently they only had about 5-foot waves in Hawaii. It very much depends on what the earthquake does. The big tsunami they had in Japan was when an area about 30 square kilometers uplifted by nearly a kilometer all at once. So all the water over it had to leave. And it went in every direction, and they had 30-foot high waves. It comes in waves. It doesn't come in like a big wall of water all the time. Sometimes it does. And so it's not the earthquake itself that creates the tsunami. It's what happens to the ocean floor. If you get like huge landslides coming down into the water, pushing the water out of the way, that can create a tsunami of sorts. There's a place in the Azores, I think it's the Azores, where there is a very unstable underground plateau that suddenly and dramatically drops to the ocean floor. And scientists have ever said that if that ever subsides, it might create a very large tsunami in the Atlantic going toward the coast. I don't know, though, because if it's all underground already and you just have some of it move, the water will just come back around on top. So I don't know. Anywhere. Paul C. Victor Kilo 4. Delta Papa Charlie from Brisbane in VK land says, hi, Dave and fellow Augies, Paul C. And welcome. We have the UK, we have Australia, we have the Philippines, we have Canada, and we have the US. So a very international audience tonight. Joe beat one, sad story. I was going to put an antenna in my roof space and then found out it was lined with a metal radiant barrier for insulation, which pretty much shuts down using that space for an antenna. Yes, it does. Yes, it does, unfortunately. But you might be able to do a very thin wire or magnet wire or something like that out in the backyard if you've got an HOA. Now, there is a bill before Congress. There was one bill that almost passed. At the end of each session, there's something called an omnibus bill. They throw in everything that they think everybody agrees on. And then they will withdraw from it if even a single representative or senator doesn't want that particular thing in there. And the act that we need to force HOAs to allow us to have antennas was in there, but one senator from Florida didn't want it. Apparently he'd gotten a nasty letter from some association of HOAs. Okay, so it didn't pass. You know, everybody was for it except one guy. Well, it's back before Congress in a rewritten format. And so we'll see if it passes. It's not going to be important enough to come up for a voice vote. It's going to end up in an omnibus bill. They've got so much going on in the federal government right now. So, you know, we'll have to see. Hopefully someday that bill will get passed. It'll be a federal law limiting homeowners associations, saying that an amateur radio operator must be allowed, and it gets really hazy here, an antenna for effective communications. Now, what does that mean? Some court's going to have to interpret it, saying, is that a 35-foot tower with a 10-element Yagi? Or is that a vertical? Or is that a dipole? What is that? So we'll get all that figured out. I imagine an end-fed dipole would pass with flying colors, because you can attach one end right to the house, and you can get it made out of gray wire, so it's real hard to see. So we'll see what happens. That is in the works. So write to your congressman. We've got to find out from the league just exactly what that bill is named. Okay, sad story, yes. Greetings this week from the lower Hudson Valley in New York. Glenn, W2KXY. I've heard you've gotten quite a bit of rain and quite a bit of hot weather. They showed the rain going down into the subway stations. Somebody named Jesus Freak stopped by but retracted his message. Phil WKA2QIK said hello to Dave and all Augies from Kalamazoo, Michigan. I mentioned earlier, I got this from somebody in Michigan, North Ottawa Amateur Radio Club. It says, enjoy this key handcrafted in Grand Haven, Michigan by NOARC members. And that's this key right here. I haven't tried it yet. It's got some little things here that you push and they make contact with this, and you can unhook the key from the metal base if you want to take just the key in your backpack. It's very light. And it plugs in here to a 1/8 inch stereo jack, and so it will run with just about anything. Most iambic keyers are iambic keys. The difference between a key and a keyer. Most iambic keys have the same wiring, and if they don't, you can usually flip it in the in one of the settings on the radio. Now, I've been working this past week to get my QRP Labs QMX radio working. It's giving me fits. One of the problems is the only band that's been open here recently is 20 meters. Well, 20 meters I got to work, but it uses different paths for different filters for different bands. So I tried transmitting into a dummy load on 160, 80, 40, 30, 20, and then the power really started to go down. It was like 6 watts on the 160, and it went down to like 1 watt on 10, and it actually goes up to 6, but 0 watts out on that. Now, one of the interesting things about the radio is the guy who designs it, Hans Summers, and he comes to Dayton every year. And I met him again this year, and I bought the QMX Plus radio from him. About $200, includes the case. And been putting it together. It took me about a week to put together and a lot longer to troubleshoot. He says, one way, if you put you have to wind a lot of toroids for this. I'll show it to you if I can get it up over here. This is it. Okay, and most of it is surface-mounted components on both sides of the board that are already mounted. Most of the construction is to wind these coils. And the only way I could make sure my turns count was correct was to put the coils, after I'd wound them, under my little microscope here and take a picture of them, print the picture, and physically count the turns. It didn't matter how hard I tried to count accurately while I was winding it, I was always wrong. So anyway, they've all got the right number of turns, but he says that when you attach these to the other side here, if you don't want to scrape the insulation off, you can just hold a blob of solder on it, and that will eventually remove the varnish that's the insulation on the coils. Well, I read in the instruction manual for the Bayou jumper that you have to have your iron at 750 degrees Fahrenheit to do that. Well, I have always operated my iron at 700 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm going to have to go over all those connections again with an iron at 750 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot. And remelt that solder there and hold it. It says it takes about 10 seconds to do it. And it should evaporate the varnish and allow the solder to make contact with the copper. So I'll try that and see how far we get. As far as receive, I tried my signal generator, turned it down as low as it would go, and also had it read over on my spectrum analyzer so I could tell how strong that signal was really, and then also fed it into the radio. And it was an S9 signal, and I could hear it on every band that the signal generator works on, which is up to 25 megahertz. So that leaves out 10 meters and 6 meters. What I need to do is use an attenuator to get that signal down to about an S3 and go through that thing again and find out what it is in the receive path that's making it a problem. Also, it's supposed to transmit about 5 watts on every band. Why is it transmitting successively less on every band as I go up? I don't know. If any of you out there have built the QMX Plus and have some ideas, drop me a line. Casler28, CASLER28 at gmail.com. Or I think the Ask Dave email is now working again. Ask Dave, all one word, at ARRL.org. Not .net, but .org. Okay. And throw in a question or two, by the way. It gives me more stuff to work with when I write the monthly column. There's a couple, one guy I responded to directly on what I thought was a simple question, and ended up taking several paragraphs to answer the question. I went, you know, this would make a perfect Ask Dave column story, so I kept that. And it may show up in there, or it may show up in a video. I try not to ignore anything completely. Now, mind you, there were a lot of you who used my website form to ask a question. By the way, that form is still there, but I'm not getting anything more in it. But a whole bunch of people sent questions, 200 or 300 questions. And I, about a year ago, came across this pile of old emails. And I'm kind of working through that little by little. I have to check everybody's call sign, because at the time they were a technician with a tech call sign. Now they're amateur extra with a different call sign, you know. But the questions they ask are valid. There's no such thing as a dumb question, unless you're trying to just trip up the narrator or something. So I had somebody ask me today, I said that an end-fed dipole needs a 49-to-1 balun. And he wrote back and says, is that 4-to-1 or 9-to-1? 4, 9, 2, 1. I said, no, it's 49-to-1. It's 2450 ohms to 50 ohms. That is a 7-to-1 turns ratio. And a lot of the way the balun, or ununs, they're ununs actually, because the ground is connected on both sides. You get 3 windings for the primary, 21 windings for the secondary. And if you use the auto transformer principle, you can reuse that first 3 windings and then just add 18 more. And that's the general principle on which the one from the RRL works. That one has a 49-to-1 balun, but it's 2 turns on the primary and then 14 turns total. So that's a 7-to-1 ratio of turns, which is the voltage. But in terms of impedance, you're looking at the both the voltage and the current. So you end up squaring that turns ratio. So it's 49-to-1 balun. So it'll convert 20 ohms into 2450 ohms. If you don't believe that, feed the balun, okay, with 50 ohm coax from a radio with 2 or 3 watts, maybe less than that. No, don't even use the radio. Use your vector network analyzer, your nano VNA, or your antenna analyzer, so on, and then put a 2450 worth of ohms on the other side of the balun. It should give you an SWR of 1-to-1. That's how you check a balun, to see if it's working right. Now, sometimes it's hard to get 2450 ohms, so you play games like you can get a 2000 ohm resistor, a 400 ohm resistor in series. Now you need a 50. There's like 47 ohm resistor. Put that in there and you can get very close. Trying to get any closer gets beyond the build accuracy of the resistors. So okay. Been watching YouTube videos here, and some kids treated it like a swimming pool. In the past, they mentioned the rats also swim in it and drop poop in the water. Well, rats like to live fairly low in the house and in the basements and stuff, and when all of those are flooded, the rats desert the ship. And it's not just rat poop that's in that water, okay? It's a lot more. That water that floods is dangerously filthy water with all sorts of E. coli in it. And, you know, Manila is not a modern city with modern sewage treatment plants and stuff like that. It is far too close to the ocean. You go downtown Manila, and you're about 2 or 3 feet above sea level, above the high tide. Okay, and the Pasig River, P-A-S-I-G, Pasig River, kind of flows around through Manila, cuts Manila in half, you know. And there's a beautiful park there, a la Central Park or the Washington Mall. A beautiful park there. It's called Rizal Park, R-I-Z-A-L. He was one of the early Filipino patriots who lobbied to make that country an independent country. And the main boulevard going from the river to the north through downtown Manila up to the north is Rizal Boulevard. There's a nice statue of him there. I've got pictures of it. And he's there. He's there, George Washington. Okay. And he, you know, there was an uprising in the Philippines around 1900. And the U.S. inherited the Philippines when the U.S. won the Spanish-American War. Remember Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders? That was the war. He charged up some hill he didn't need to charge up, but it sure made for some good newspaper copy. Anyway, we won the Spanish-American War and got the Philippines as part of the prize. 2 years later, that was 1898. In 1900, the Filipinos revolted, and the U.S. went in and put down the rebellion because the Spanish had ruled with a very light hand. To this day, there are 3 official languages in the Philippines. Tagalog, which is one of the 54 major dialects in the Philippines. It's the one spoken in and around Manila. Spanish is an official language, but nobody speaks Spanish. And English. And when English is the only common language for the whole country. When I was there when President Marcos declared martial law, I was in there, I listened to him on the radio, and he did it in English. That's the only language that's common across the Philippines. But anyway, they tried there at the end of World War II. You know, the MacArthur I shall return, which he did, of course. And when he came ashore in Dagupan, in the Lingayen Gulf, he refused. He could have easily just pulled up to a pier and gotten off, but he didn't. No, he didn't want to do that. That would not create the news photos he wanted. He got out of the boat and waded ashore, making sure that all the photographs were of him wading ashore, not getting off on the pier. So anyway, all done for the news cameras. But by then the Japanese were in disarray and retreating. So, that was a rough war in the Pacific. My dad fought in the Battle of Lingayen Gulf, which was probably the biggest naval battle of the war. You know, Pearl Harbor was a ambush. Okay, but this was the Japanese knew this was about the last chance they had to defeat the American Navy, and of course they couldn't. Because we brought in a couple carriers, we'd sunk a lot of their carriers, and they had the kamikaze pilots. I'm not sure if they were in that battle, but not much long after that they were. But the Japanese got their tail whooped and went working their way home. And the Japanese fought fiercely. I mean, truly fiercely. And I just watched a documentary on Okinawa last night, I think it was. The Japanese, instead of defending the shore, pulled inland up to behind the first ridge. And the Americans thought this is a piece of cake. All the intelligence was wrong. So they got all their stuff on shore and started to move into the island. And as they were coming up the hill, the Japanese just unloaded on them. And they had aircraft come in, and they had the big battle cruisers with their big guns coming in, which is what made Okinawa such a bloodbath. And the Japanese there even had the local population enlisted in what they were doing. Nobody got to just be a civilian and sit on the side. No, no. And so it was a terrible thing. Anyway, my dad fought in the battle of, it was in Ormoc, it was Leyte Gulf, in that area there. He ended up over in Tacloban, which is the other side of the island. On my mission, I went to Ormoc, so we were on the same island, but that's as close as we got to crossing each other's tracks there. So anyway, okay. Hello, Dave from Kalamazoo. Swimming pool, yeah, I know. Well, one thing you've got to consider, and this is something, we were told when we got there, do not drink the water. And so we would have pop for all our water needs. I loved their, I can't remember the name of it. It's an orange drink made from real orange juice. It's really good. I can't remember the name of it. I had a bottle of it at a Filipino store over in the Denver area. Royal True Orange, TRU, Royal True Orange. I loved that stuff. But by the time I left, the water there didn't bother me at all. When I got home to Los Angeles, the Los Angeles water bothered the heck out of me. It was horrible. I had Montezuma's Revenge for 2 or 3 weeks till I got used to the LA water. That was quite a transition. Anyway, okay, so we have good news from Josh Earhart. Says, Dave and chat, I passed my tech Sunday with your help. Thanks so much. And he gives his score there, which of course is a passing score. Now, a little secret. It doesn't matter what your score is because it will never be used again by anybody. All you have to say is, you passed. And that's what I did when I took my extra. I was not really prepared for the test. I took it to see what it was like. And then I handed in my score, the answer sheet to the VEs who were sitting there and said, please score it, tell me if I passed, but do not tell me my score. And they said, Dave, you passed. I said, stop there. Stop right there. I don't want to know what the score was. And I never did find out. And I'm glad I never found out because all that mattered was that I passed. Okay, so, and Josh says, my help, which must mean the tech training videos, which are on the ARRL headquarters YouTube channel. They're readily available, they're free. Now, as you work on your general, join the league, and then that gives you access to what's behind the firewall. And at the learn.arrl.org website, which you have to log into using your same ARRL login credentials, they've been unable to make a single sign-on work. In any event, you'll find the general and the extra in there, and they're all up to date. Everything is up to date. That's part of my contract with the league, is I keep those videos up to date. Okay, and they're my videos. They lease them from me, to be their videos. And so, not this year, I got a buy this year. Next year, we'll be updating the tech, the year after that, the general, and the year after that, the extra, so that they're always current. And the way that I do that, there's a 2 or 3 week changeover period, because what I have to have is the old PDF of the preceding manual. In other words, the manual that's going out. And then it's marked up by the guy who updates the book into the new manual. And then I can go through that and see what has changed and what it's been changed to. And then I know what changes I need to make in the videos. Because, you know, sometimes the band allocations change a little bit. Or the FCC clarifies something, so we've got to change the rules. Stuff like that, okay? There's not big changes. But I want the videos to match the book, section for section, okay? And so that's where my assistant and I are very busy. As soon as we get that updated book, which is usually in like June, then by July 30th, things change. That's when we start posting the new videos. There was a big change this last time around in the extra, or maybe it was the general. They went from RF safety to tower safety. So we had to put up an entirely brand new video for tower safety. Now, for good measure, I left the RF safety video up there. It's the RF safety section in the extra manual used to be an identical reprint of the RF safety section in the general manual. But now they've got it covered in general, and in extra they're talking about tower safety. The bottom line is, don't fall off your friggin' tower. Every year we lose 4 or 5 hams to tower accidents. Towers are best left either to the professionals or the very few amateurs in the area that tend to specialize in it. Okay? Let me tell you, 35 feet up is a lot less than 35 feet down. So be very careful. Do not ever climb a tower by yourself. I don't care how experienced you are. Don't climb a tower by yourself. At a minimum, somebody needs to be the safety observer. The safety observer's only job is to pick up the phone and call 911 when something bad happens. Now, if that safety observer is also holding on to a rope to bring some tools up to you, they can't be the safety observer because they can't do that with 2 hands at once, okay? So the safety observer has no other job except to call 911. And then you want 2 or 3 people with you. One guy's going to go up the tower, okay? The guy on the tower is in charge, always. People may have suggestions, but the guy on the tower makes the final decision. Period. Don't become a tower casualty this year. About 5 hams will. I don't want it to be any of you. Okay, let's see. People are saying congrats to Josh, and absolutely well earned. And Glenn made my first 6-meter contact a few weeks ago. Very good. Get on the air these days. We're at the peak of the sunspot cycle right now, and it's only downhill from here. So first 6 is going to fade out, then 10, then 12, and we'll be back to 40 and 80 and 20 during the day. But that's okay. We'll live with it. All right. Chris Goodman, K0BLU. Hello, Dave, from St. Cloud, Minnesota. We're at 71 and hazy. Chris also says he likes the t-shirt from Dayton. This is last year's, 2024, Expanding Our Community. The new one has something to do with charting our course. And they've got this beautiful menage of nautical type things, you know, for charting a course. And the only way to work the compass pointer in there was to have the red compass pointer point down. Anybody knows that the red pointer on the compass points up to north, magnetic north. Okay, we're about 12 degrees off here in Colorado from magnetic north, so that makes it fun when you're flying, because in flying, everything is magnetic north. Everything. Even the GPS will give you your direction heading in magnetic north. It's holdover from the early days. So anyway, let's see. Yeah, this is a nice shirt. I like it. Let's see. And Josh says, thank you. Andrew Goodwin, hope that you and yours are well. Yes. Tom Bartman, can a 10-meter antenna or any be too high? Yes. The optimum height for a dipole, horizontal antenna, is 1/2 wavelength. Because then you have a single lobe going out from the antenna, and it's pointed the lowest toward ground it will get. Now, if you make that antenna higher, that will lower that lobe a little bit, but it starts to create a secondary lobe that starts robbing power from the primary lobe. When you get your antenna up to a full wavelength height, you've got 2 lobes with a very sharp notch in between. That's why I say a wavelength is probably the proper height. I once heard about a ham who put up a 100-foot tower. It was a big deal for them. 100-foot tower is a tall tower. Now that is a long ways down. But he put his beam up there. I modeled his beam in Easy NEC with a 100-foot tower, and the radiation pattern looked like a flower with all the lobes on it and all the nulls in between. Big DX stations will have the 100-foot tower with their big beam up there, but they'll have another beam a third of the way down that can independently rotate using some mechanics with a circular thing around this thing. And then at 1/3 height, they'll have another beam. And they'll switch between those beams to see which one has the best signal. And it could very easily be the lowest one. So if you're mounting a vertical antenna, the standard mount for a vertical antenna, if it's a quarter wave vertical, is on the ground with radials laying on top of the ground. Insulated, stranded radials. Doesn't matter too much what the length is, just throw them down there and they work fine. You can elevate an antenna, but as you elevate it, you need to have tuned radials, 2 for each band. So 2 for 40, 2 for 20. You can skip 15 because you can use the 40 meter for that. You need them for 30, you need them for 17, and 12 and 10, okay, if you have a multi-band antenna up there. So what you're doing is basically putting the antenna in the air so the trees and stuff won't get in the way of it. And then you're raising ground to be right with it. So it's still ground mounted. That's the way it'll act. But it's aerial. It's up above everything. And you can do that if you want. You certainly can. Okay, so yes, an antenna can be It's not illegal. It's not unethical. And it's not fattening. Okay? So you can do it if you want to. Nobody's going to come and say, your antenna's too high. But the fact is that the radiation pattern can get these lobes in it. So, you know, model that before you put it up. Like, if I put a 35-foot tower in the backyard, I wouldn't. I think I'd have somebody else do it. But I priced that out, and it was $30,000 for a self-standing tower, and that is without any antenna or rotator on it. Anyway, that was a quote from tower professionals who put these things up for a living. And they put up all the cell towers and everything like that. A lot of tower work out there. If you put a 20-meter antenna on top of a 35-foot tower, it's about a half wavelength high. But for the 20-meter part, or for the 10-meter part of that, it's twice as high as it should be. So, you know, pays your money, takes your choice. Anyway, thinking about building an LM, where did it happen here? I think somebody, Larry mentioned to him. Okay. Glenn K. Thinking about building an LAD MOS solid state linear amplifier. I like the boards sold by DX World E or W6PQL. The cost of building a 600 watt amp is close to a 1200 watt amp, so I might well go in big. Okay, high power amplifiers are, it's sort of like knowing how to build a guitar. A lot of people can do it, but not very many people can do it well. Those transistors that are in there, they're like airplanes. They're strong in every way they need to be strong, and then otherwise they're pretty delicate. Okay, so if it's a kit, fine. Okay, you know that the design is good. If you're going to design your own, start small and work up. Because those triodes, okay, a power transistor is fundamentally a triode. So now it's current driven rather than voltage driven. I know that. But neutralization can be a thing. And if, as you know with the tube, if it's not properly neutralized, it'll ruin the tube. Yes, tubes can be ruined, and without burning out the filament. Okay, so you might as well go big. Well, if you've got a kit or you've got an instruction book that tells you how to make it, fine, okay, and do it very, very carefully. The schematics for these things are actually pretty simple. The coax comes in, goes to a Class B thing where each side is on like that, and then it goes to the antenna. And that's about all there is to it, but there's a lot of control circuitry in there. There's a lot of circuitry to protect the antenna so that if your SWR suddenly goes fluey, you know, as the wind wiggles your coax, it'll immediately shut down the amp and you'll be back on. Now, in this case, when you're building an amp like that, the radio, the 100-watt radio, is called the exciter. Okay, it provides the necessary excitation to the amplifier for the amplifier to do the real work. Now, what happens to your 100 watts? Where does it go? Does it also go out the coax? No, it does not. It is dissipated as heat inside the amplifier, which is why they're really good on cloudy wintry days and all that, because you're putting a lot of heat into the room. And so they're using different things to match impedances. You got to make sure that the impedance that you're transceiver sees is 50 ohms. And it should be with any modern circuit. It should be 50 ohms, SWR 1-to-1. Okay, and then the amplifier itself will have high SWR protection, where it will fold back or shut down if the SWR goes too high, and it does it in a flash. So if you do get a tuner for it, if you may have to have a tuner for it, you need a 1200 watt tuner now, because you're dealing with much higher voltages and much higher currents. Now remember, the ratio between the voltage and the current is always 50 ohms. But if the current goes up, the voltage goes up. So you need these big honking tuners with the great big giant coils and the great big giant capacitors and stuff in order to tune it. Now, I have a 500 watt amplifier here. If I feed it with 16 volts, it's a lot closer to 600 watts. And I have to make sure that my antennas are actually in tune, because I don't have a big tuner. So I've got to make sure everything's in tune. Otherwise, this thing will just drop out in a flash. And I'll be back to my 100 watts. Okay. Larry in Manila says, the last time I chatted here, I mentioned my grandson is wanting to get into the hobby. I found that he is not of age for Class C, but Class D, which is only VHF, and the test is rules and regs. Well, very good. That's very good. Get him into it. I mentioned to him to take the tech license and shoot for Class C. I'll check with our radio users in the Philippines. Chris Goodman, oh man, we're running out of time. Civic, nautical, and astronomical twilights, both in the evening and morning. There is a golden hour for time when the sun is just above the horizon. That's known as the golden hour for photography, too. That's when you get the most beautiful pictures of mountains and streams and even people, is not long before sunset or not long after sunrise. The direct light from overhead is not very flattering light for photography. Now, I have a beautiful picture of Mount Moran, which is right next to the Tetons. And it's the classic picture you always see, what looks like a lake. It's actually a bend in a river and all that sort of thing. The only thing I can say about my picture that's different is I've got ducks in it. When my wife and I stopped there to take the picture, I practically just planted my tripod in the holes left by the previous guy's tripod, because everybody's got that picture. But during the day, the sun is not very flattering. In the evening or the early morning is when to do the Tetons, because the sun, the golden sun, hits them and makes it very beautiful there. I was up at Delicate Arch one time, and it was not long before sunset, and there were a whole bunch of photographers out next to me with their fancy camera equipment and stuff like that. I had a little small camera. Anyway, when the golden hour arrived, all you could hear was shutters going up and down the aisle. I actually turned and took a picture of them. I said, this is the real picture. This is the action at Delicate Arch at sunset. But sunset is when you want to get the picture. Okay, and there's a certain spot so you can see one of the La Salle Mountains through the arch. And it was really funny. So anyway, okay. There is a PDF booklet called RFAX that tells the frequencies of countries still using WFAX and others. Is 85-page booklet, mostly catching Japan, Australia, and South Korea here. Greg Lopez, KT4RAM, good to see you, OG1 and friends. John Hummel Newell, cool key, yes it is, and I'll try it tomorrow and see if it's easy to work. Chris Goodman, K0BLU, HR 1094 and SR 459 Amateur Radio Emergency Preparedness Act for the 119th Congress, which is the one that was just dismissed so they wouldn't have to vote on the Epstein files. They'll get to vote when they come back, but you can only postpone that. The thing about a good conspiracy theory, and the Epstein thing is a really good conspiracy theory, is that there's no way to disprove it. I saw the Mythbusters show where they tried to disprove the conspiracy theory that the entire moon landing was done on a soundstage in Hollywood. And they went through every point that they made and rebutted it. Did it change any minds? No. How can you prove that you've been to the moon? Well, I guess you've got to take that person along and dump them on the moon. Whether you want to bring him back or not is up to you, but they've got to go through it themselves. There's some people who just will not believe others. I have a neighbor who is literally a flat earther. She claims the Bible says the earth is flat. I can't think of any verse in the Bible that says that. And Book of Mormon makes it clear that planets are round. Anyway, I said, I'm not going there with you. I'm not even going to listen to it. I've heard it before. It's stupid. I wasn't very nice. And I said, all this stuff I've learned about amateur radio and ionization and getting signals around the world and so on and so forth requires a round Earth. It won't work. The Earth is flat. Also, if the Earth is flat, the sun, as it comes up, it'd be the same time everywhere. So, and if the sun were close enough to the Earth that actually looking at it would be different angles, the sun would fry Earth in about 10 seconds. So it's a medium size main sequence star, about halfway through its astronomical age. It's a yellow star. The surface temperature is on the order of 5,000 to 5,500 degrees Celsius. What's interesting is that the atmosphere above the sun is over 1 million degrees. But what we see is the surface of the sun, and that's 5,500 degrees Celsius. Can we recreate that on Earth? Absolutely. In fact, when you get daylight light bulbs, they put out light that's equivalent to 5,500 degrees Kelvin. Now, if you're on a cloudy day and you measure the color of the light, it's about 8,800 degrees Kelvin. It's blue. Our eyes interpret it as gray and ugly. Now, the old incandescent bulbs are about 2,300 degrees Celsius. They have very little blue light in them. When Edison put his light bulb together, he wanted it to look like a candle. He wanted it to have the same color as a candle to make it easier to sell. And that's why the incandescent bulbs have the color they do. Can you get an incandescent bulb that is daylight? Yes, you can. They're specialized for photography. You turn them on, take the shot, and turn them off because they have a total lifetime of about an hour. Now, when you get daylight fluorescent, they're very heavy in the green. I had a heck of a time. I had a studio set up in the other room with green screen, all fluorescent lighting. And I had to work and work and work and work and work to get the color balance in the camera right so it looked like daylight. Even though I had daylight bulbs, they were green. Now I've got an LED light up here for my workbench that's about 4,000 Kelvin. And I think the industry's trying to move us toward 4,000 Kelvin. I don't know why. Maybe the phosphors are cheaper. Okay, I've got a light right up here that's burning daylight and incandescent colors. They're in opposite rows. If you look at it up there, you can kind of see it, but it's too bright to see the what the individual LEDs are doing. What did I do? Put this back on. Okay. And you can actually adjust it for any color you want. This light right here, which is a light that you buy from Walmart for about $8, has a built-in bulb, and there's no access to the bulb. It's LED. There's no need for access to it. So you got these three colors running around. The ones that match the incandescent, those are the ones I'd get for your home, because that's what we're used to, what we grew up with, what our eyes want to see. When it's nighttime, our eyes want to see firelight, which is very reddish, orangish. Okay, now we go a little brighter than that. We get a little more green with the incandescent, but not very much blue. Then there's the 4000, then there's the 5500 daylight, and there's something called a color rendering index that will tell you how well that light bulb actually creates daylight. And you want an index 85 or more. It's kind of hard to get. They get expensive at that point. And then there are the shop lights. Shop lights are blue, and they blink faster than the eye can see. But if you hold your hand like this and go like that, you can see the spots in there where it's dark light, and so on. You can see it kind of with these two. Anyway, different color light bulbs. Okay, good to see you, OG. Let's see. So write to your congressman about House Resolution 1094, Senate R459, Amateur Radio Emergency Preparedness Act for the 119th AREPA. I guess that's what it would be. And Paul says, happy birthday for earlier in the week. Thank you. VK4DPC. Gary Graham. Nobody has yet added any money to the chat revenue, if that works for you. And I'm not trying to guilt you into anything. I do rely on it to run the channel. So, Gary Graham, howdy y'all. Glenn Martin, my father fought in Eniwetok, Kwajalein, and Guam. He was at Guadalcanal after most of the shooting. Yeah, the Pacific Theater. Oh, golly. It was the Marines versus the Japanese, and the ships brought along some heavy armor so they could beat the living daylights out of the shore. And then, of course, there were the Navy pilots. So between the Navy and Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps is part of the Navy, it was a Navy show. Now, there were Army troops there, too, but it was really a Navy show. Fortunately, we had already figured out at that point that the capital ship was the aircraft carrier. And the turn of the tide in World War II in the Pacific was midway. And the reason is the code-breaking unit in Hawaii at the Navy base there had broken the Japanese tactical code, but they didn't know what the two-letter group was that meant Midway. It was one of two islands, and they didn't know which one it was. So they had the people on Midway Island transmit in the clear to headquarters that they were running low on water. This is Midway. We're running low on water. When can we expect more? In the clear. Half hour later, they got this Japanese coded message saying island such and such, I think it was AN, is running out of water. By that ruse, they discovered which island the Japanese were going after. They were going after Midway. And we were ready. And they came right into our trap. And that is how radio changed the course of history. That one signal, we're running out of water on Midway, when can you send more? Or something to that effect. But that was quite interesting. Okay. Glenn, your father was a hero. Larry says, been watching a YouTube called Silent Service, that's submarines. We buy water in containers to size of gasoline containers, pay 25 pesos each. Well, that's cheaper than bottled water in the U.S., but still, that's expensive. Eric Coop, AF7P, getting some RF from my transmitter to my neighbor's stove clock. Light still going off. Any suggestions would be helpful. Antenna is well grounded, DX Commander. Okay, and make sure that your coax is grounded to your lightning arrestor just at the ground rod right outside your station before it comes into the station, and that your transmitter and all the other stuff is grounded to a single point, which is then grounded to the ground rod outside. Don't forget that, because that really, really helps with RFI. The other thing that you would have to do is, well, the problem is the stove itself runs on 240 volts, okay? And the connector for the stove to plug in is huge. So you'd have to go over, get a toroid as big as you can, and go over and wrap the cord around it one time, then put that plug back on, put it back in the wall. That may help, probably more than anything else. Or you could try grounding the stove. The stove should be grounded through that cord, but pull the plug out of the wall, find the ground plug, and make sure there's continuity between all the metal things on the stove. Okay, that stove should be thoroughly grounded. If it's not, then you got to find out, and you may have to have a repairman come at their expense. You're within your rights, but you got to be nice, because nobody's going to agree with you on that. Anyway, make sure that it really is grounded, because that'll help a lot. Okay. Wow. Hey, Rick Wilson, I remember when you changed shirt colors between new and old sections of videos. Actually, I didn't. I shot all the old videos in blue. The blue shirt was actually a light blue striped shirt. And then the next year I filmed update, not next year, next time for updates. I filmed the updates in an orange shirt so you could tell what was the new material. And so people thought I was switching back and forth. I wasn't. I was just replacing the parts that had changed with the orange shirt material. Okay, yeah. Carol, my sister-in-law's mom, was on Guam during World War II. She failed to bow to a Japanese soldier and got buried alive. Fortunately, she was rescued. That is good news. Glenn Martin, the compass needle is magnetic north, and the geographic North Pole is a magnetic south. Yes, it is, because it's got to be so that the magnetic field line loop can be complete, and that is true. Art Bell from Josh. Art Bell was a big fan of Manila too. Ham radio with AE4IT. Hello. Glenn, thanks for all you do for us hams. I really do try. Chris, good episode this week from Star Trek, Strange New World. Yes. Thank you, Dave, for a great night. Yeah, it's time we quit. Had a shipmate when I talked about the moon landing asked me, were you there when they landed? I says if I was, then I would be first one on the moon. Not Armstrong. Very good. The Wandering Musician. I watched it live, by the way, the moon landing. I had just graduated high school and was out at a desert cabin. Some friends of mine went somewhere, and I sat and watched the moon landing. So I was as close as you could get. Back there, television really was real time. There was no digital delay. It was real time. Okay, hey Dave, had my first 10 gig experience on Sunday. My friend was trying to work some rain scatter. Have you ever tried 10 gig? No. The weather radars work at 10 gig because 10 gig is very much affected by rain. That's how you find the rain. Okay, Glenn K has added $10 to the chat revenue and jumping up and down there. Thank you. And this is their first super on a live stream from Glenn K. So thank you very much. The Happy Hogger headed to Sturgis tomorrow on my Harley. I'm taking my FT891. I hope to, at minimum, activate Mount Rushmore. Well, that would be good. I've been there. I was there the week after the big Sturgis rally, but we did go into the Harley-Davidson store. We were on motorcycles, but only one of us rode a Harley. No, two of us did. Two of them did. I rode a Yamaha. And that was interesting. Happy Hogger, Sturgis, have fun. Patrick Boaz, hello, I live in Chicago. I'd like to DX the Philippines. I have family there. What's the best way to do it? Go to can't remember the name of it. There is a website that can help you predict based on the latest magneto whatever, that can predict when a good time is and what band. And then that'll get you kind of started. There's no guarantee that that's going to work on any given nine. I think those projections are good for about a month. And I can't remember the name. It's a government website, which means it's probably under review. But they also do this for mariners and aviators and stuff like that. Okay, have fun up in Sturgis. Crowded up there. Okay, my ship mentioned they were changing all the light bulbs to those fluorescent, which made it harder in my eyes. Yes. My dad was an electronic tech and not in the war and combat, but was in the war as electronic expert. Glenn, happy belated birthday. Sean, KM6NFO, adds $10 to the chat revenue. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Larry, my Wi-Fi is not good. It keeps searching. Yeah, and I've been getting double messages from you. So somewhere along the circuit that goes a third of the way around the world. Arch, Dave, don't you ever doubt what the government says on the news media? Of course I do. Because I'm 74 years old and I know how the press works. They often call themselves the first draft of history. And that's true. But I really prefer to hear the second draft, you know, after they fix it up a little bit. But I can look at stuff on television. Like, for example, there was a big explosion in Nebraska at some kind of a plant. And they kept saying, in Nebraska, in Nebraska, in Nebraska. And my wife, who is from Nebraska, kept yelling at the TV, where in Nebraska? That kind of thing drives me nuts. Now, I do watch mainstream media. I've tried watching other media and it drives me crazy because I can tell. Having worked with and for the government for so long, my BS filter is pretty well tuned. And I can tell when what somebody is saying is BS. And I hear a lot of it. But yeah, I can watch the mainstream media and go, okay, I know enough about how the police operate to see behind the scene. I was in the military once myself. I know how the military works, and so on and so forth. And I kind of do little course corrections in real time to the media. But I still think if you really want to know what's actually going on, it's your best bet to include the mainstream media in your media diet, whatever that may be, okay? Everybody has freedom of speech. And now, freedom of speech does not mean that you get a free audience, okay? You got to earn your audience. But there are a lot of people speaking different things, and you can go choose what you want to hear. I've been told, I've never tried this. I don't watch Fox News because I start yelling at the TV. But if all you view is Fox News, turn off Fox News for 2 weeks and watch CNN. And then do whatever you want after that. I have heard that people who have done that have gone, whoa, there's a vast gulf in how different organizations report the news. So anyway, there you go. You know, like I subscribe to the Washington Post. It's a liberal left-leaning organization. And I go into reading it with that mindset. This stuff is colored blue. And I got to back that out to see what actually happened. The New York Times is more centrist, but still slightly blue. And I've subscribed to them, and I got to do the same thing, you know. And our local press tends to be red because this area we live in is very red. Colorado's a blue state, but that's because of Denver and Boulder. The rest of the state is pretty red. But, you know, I want the truth with the least possible varnish on it. Okay, I want to know the background, the circumstances. I want to know where people are coming from. I want to know where the money is. Where's the money? Follow the money. That'll lead you to the truth. And so on. So, yeah, I factor in a BS factor on all the news I look at. Okay, where are we? Is that vocab? It's not vocab. vocab is a piece of software that you run on the internet. vocab for ham radio user's manual. Okay, vocab is voacap.com, not .gov. It's free professional high-frequency propagation prediction software from the NTI, National Technical Information Administration, and so on, originally developed for the Voice of America. Okay, now read the new and improved vocab for ham radio users manual, and vocab Windows, miscellaneous, vocab for ham radio, the vocab engine, real propagation visualized. They've got some of it in other languages and so on. Try vocab, it's a good starting point, but that's not what I was thinking about. Okay, all right, I'm going to stop here because I've run you guys way over time and tested your patience and everything. I love this. I love all of you. I love the interaction. I want to tell you about something. I just started a Google group that is the equivalent of one of the Groups.io kind of thing, except Groups.io costs a lot of money. They're expensive. You know, it's like 30 or 40 cents a user, and I'm going, whoa, I've got 133,000 subscribers. Man, I'd be broke in a minute. So Googles are free, at least for now. So we've got a Google group, and I'll get that URL all squared away. And it's open. Now, I will initially be reviewing posts before they go up. Okay, initially. I have found from YouTube that I really don't need to do much review. There are a few weird ones that sneak through, but those are easy enough to delete. So we'll have a Google group so you can all talk to each other, okay? And I think some good things will come out of that. I looked at the pricing for Zoom. Whoa. Now, there are only 68 people concurrent right now. That wouldn't be too bad, but the free one is limited to 42 minutes, and there's a limit on the number of people that can be on the call. Because I'd really like to, get a two-way thing going here. Again, if you see me at a Hamfest, stop me, talk to me, introduce yourself, tell me about your station, and so on. I had dozens upon dozens of people stop me at Dayton. It was a really good year for that. My next big Hamfest is Albuquerque, which is in September, and then Pacificon, which is in October. And there's also another one in October, which is the Rocky Mountain Regional, that's in Grand Junction, which is just up the road. And I plan to present at all of those. I'll be giving some sort of presentation. So that's the groups. There you go. All right. So I'm going to say 73. Where is it up here? Now I know this is going to. I'm looking at myself from. Can't quite see the clock back there. The clock back there right now. Whoa. Okay, that's running about 4 minutes behind real time. Okay, so I'll let it go for another 2 or 3 minutes here. And, I would love to try Friedrichshafen. I got to tell you, parents, that is on my bucket list. I want to do that. Now, my one experience traveling in Europe, I found that lots and lots and lots of people speak English. So my German is very limited. But I really would like to see that. Let's see, it was 22 we quit approximately. And I'm looking at the clock in there because the clock's running behind real time. We've been on for more than 2 hours. Can you believe that? All